Now, Ian, we've got the Pacific Islands fake crying about rising sea levels when they're still selling their deep sea mining deposits to China under the table in accordance with the Blue Economy Memorandum of Understanding. So they're not really worried about sea levels rising, unless, of course, Albanese is somewhere nearby and they think they can scam some Australian taxpayer money off him. So what I have seen a lot from our readers is the question of, is the sea level rising? Is it rising catastrophically? And is this any different to the long-held trends of sea level changes?
Well, sea level is rising very, very slightly. And that is exactly what we'd expect after a period called the Little Ice Age. We've been in an interglacial now for some 14,700 years. Sea level has risen during that period 130 metres. So we are getting very slight sea level changes, but the models are absolutely totally incorrect. And this report, which I wrote about, gives a very good example of that. Sea level change in Oslo has been measured for a very long period of time, for about 120 years. Now, in Oslo, in Norway, there are models to show that the sea level is going to rise. It's going to rise alarmingly, and you'd better worry about this. And it was going to rise some enormous figure, when in fact it's fallen. And it's fallen over the last 120 years. Now, the rise predicted, and I'll have to look at my Specky article, and God knows where I wrote about this. Well, you'll have to read it in the Specky article. But so we've got a lot of evidence of sea level measurements which are showing that they're totally out of accord with the models. And these sea level measurements don't really consider what the land's doing. The land is rising in many parts of the world. That's why the sea level has appeared to fall at Oslo. The land is actually sinking in other parts of the world, and that's why it looks as if a sea level rise. So you cannot talk about sea level changes unless you talk about the land level changes. And don't you try to tell me, this is just geology, everything happens slowly. We know from historical measurements that sea level and land level rise and fall. We know from historical measurements that the land level rises and falls very quickly, and it can rise a few metres in 1,000 years. This is clearly the same sort of measurements we're getting for sea level rise. So if you're on the coast and the sea level's dropping, then everything's fine. But if you're on the coast and the land level's falling, then you've got a relative sea level rise. So you have to be very, very careful when you talk about sea level change. And this is what this Ole Humlen report from the Global Warming Policy Foundation tells us. Be very careful.
Yes, well, when I was doing the research on this a long time ago, that was the problem there, because sometimes the land was going up, sometimes the land was going down. So trying to get a stable sea level reading is very difficult.